All right, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood ingredients out there, monosodium glutamate, or MSG. For years, it's been the bad guy of the pantry, blamed for all sorts of health issues. But what does the science actually have to say about it?
So that's the big question, isn't it? For literally decades, this little flavor enhancer has been accused of causing everything from headaches to nausea. But is it really the culinary villain everyone thinks it is? Let's follow the evidence and see where it takes us. You've probably heard the stories, right? Someone eats a big meal, and pretty soon after, they start feeling off. Maybe it's a headache, some facial flushing, or numbness. This whole collection of symptoms got a really controversial name, Chinese restaurant syndrome. And MSG was immediately singled out as the #1 culprit.
Okay, so let's start our investigation right there with the accusation. How in the world did this one ingredient get such a terrible reputation? Well, first, we kind of need to know what MSG actually is. So when you break it down, MSG is, well, it's surprisingly simple. It's just the salt version of glutamic acid, which is an amino acid. That means it's a basic building block of protein. It's already in our bodies, and it's found naturally in tons of foods we eat all the time, like Parmesan cheese, tomatoes, mushrooms. Its whole job in our food is just to give it that delicious, savory umami flavor. The whole firestorm really kicked off back in the late 1960s. That's when some reports and letters started popping up, describing people feeling unwell after eating at Chinese restaurants. And just like that, the term MSG's symptom complex was born. This was the moment MSG's public image took a massive nosedive, and the debate we're still having today really began.
But here's where it gets interesting. While the court of public opinion was finding MSG guilty, what was the scientific community discovering? Well, that brings us to the defense's side of the story, and it paints a very different picture.
You see, starting way back in the 80s, one major health organization after another started looking into this, and a pattern emerged. In 87, a World Health Organization committee found no health hazard. In 95, a major U.S. biology group said it was safe for pretty much everyone. In 2003, Australia and New Zealand's Food Authority found no convincing link to illness. And then, in a really big move in 2018, the International Headache Society actually removed MSG from its list of things that could cause headaches.
Here in the United States, the FDA's position couldn't be clearer. They put MSG on what's called the GRAS list, which stands for Generally Recognized as Safe. This puts it in the exact same category as stuff you use every day without a second thought, like salt, pepper, or vinegar. The FDA does say that some people report sensitivities, but here's the key. In proper, controlled scientific studies, they haven't been able to consistently prove that MSG is the cause.
And the World Health Organization, they went even further. They put MSG in their absolute safest category for food additives. It's considered so safe that they said the acceptable daily intake is not specified. Now, in the world of food regulation, that's a huge vote of confidence. It basically means they looked at all the science and decided there was no reason to even set a limit on how much a person could safely eat in a day. So with the FDA, the World Health Organization, and decades of studies all saying it's safe, you'd think that's it, right? Case closed. But, it's never quite that simple.
Just when you think you've got it all figured out, the story takes a turn. And this plot twist comes to us from Europe, where their food safety experts decided to take a much more cautious approach. And the whole European side of this debate really comes down to this one number, 30 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. See, in 2017, the European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, kind of broke from that global consensus. They set this brand new, specific daily limit for any glutamates added to food. And that was a pretty big deal, especially compared to the WHO's no limit needed position. So what gives? Why the sudden caution?
Well, here's their logic. It wasn't because they thought MSG was suddenly dangerous. Their big concern was about total exposure. They ran the numbers and figured that some people, especially kids who eat a lot of foods with added glutamate, things like packaged soups, sauces, processed foods, might go over this new super cautious limit. And this brings us to the final act of our investigation. This is maybe the most important part because it gets into the science of how our bodies actually deal with glutamate. Because it turns out, context is everything.
This right here is the heart of the scientific rebuttal. Studying MSG by giving it to someone in a capsule or a glass of water is totally different from that person eating it as part of a real meal. The minute you add other foods, carbs, proteins, it completely changes how our body absorbs and uses glutamate. And this is the magic number that explains exactly why that is. 90%. So get this. When you eat glutamate as part of a meal, your gut calls dibs. It immediately uses about 90% of it for its own energy. It's fuel for your gut cells. This means that whole fear people had of MSG flooding their system, it's almost biologically impossible when you eat it in food. Your gut acts like this amazing, super effective buffer. And this really helps put it all into perspective. When you look at all the glutamate we eat in a day, scientists figure that only about 12% actually comes from added MSG. The other 88%? It's already naturally there in the food we eat anyway. So the MSG added for flavor is just a tiny little slice of a much bigger, totally natural pie. Okay, so after hearing the accusation, the defense, the plot twist, and the final scientific rebuttal, where do we land? Let's pull all the evidence together and deliver a verdict. So let's just boil it all down. First, the overwhelming global scientific consensus says MSG in food is safe. Second, Europe's more cautious view isn't because MSG is toxic, it's about the total amount of glutamate some people might be eating. Third, and this is the big one, context is everything. How you eat it completely changes the game. And finally, fourth, glutamate isn't some strange chemical invader, it's a fundamental nutrient our bodies actually use for energy.
This story of MSG is just a fascinating look at how science, culture, and fear can all get tangled up. For decades, it was the ultimate food villain. But the scientific evidence paints a picture of, well, not a poison, but a deeply misunderstood nutrient. So now that you've heard the evidence, what's your verdict?